Well, hello friends now, and welcome to the Pirate Round. I be Captain Scoutopus, and this be the Scarlet Raven, and this be our friend Captain Tarnar, who's journeyed up here from the Southern Realms, bringing stories and gifts and many fine things here for us to talk about. And on this episode, we're going to talk about very famous pirate-type peoples. And we're going to call this here, The One Who Got Away With It All. But first, we're going to have ourselves a drink and a toast. And this here toast now goes out to all our friends here at the Pirate Round. Thank you so much for stabbing that subscribe button with your cutlash and spreading it now from friends to friends and peoples to peoples. And letting everyone know that here at the Pirate Round, you know, we're all about education and we're all about rum and we're all about stories. And here's what we say, yar har.
Yar har. Yar har.
It's a good. Now, so here we go.
Henry Avery.
It's true.
Jack Avery.
Long Ben.
John Avery.
Long Ben.
Benjamin Bridgeman.
Long Ben.
The Arch Pirate.
Yar.
The
Not
Pirate
the
King.
Archbishop. The Pirate King, they say.
Those are all names
Many names he had.
of Henry Avery.
Same person. Yar.
Now, Henry Avery was born in August 23rd of 1659 in Newton, Fenrose, United Kingdom. We're not really sure when he died, though.
No.
Because that is the mystery
That be the mystery.
behind Henry Avery.
Yar.
Now, many believe that he was the son of John and Anne Avery, but you know, there's no real proof of that. We know this because of the Avery family that lived in that area, who were minor nobles, who had a little bit of rank in society.
Yar.
And there are accounts that that young Avery spent his youth as a sailor. Because if you have many kids, you know, you can't have all of them just doing one thing. You might send one off to work for the church. You might send another one off to be a soldier or a sailor. So that was a tale that he was a sailor.
Yar. I can see that.
There are also many accounts that he was at the bombing of Algiers in 1671.
If he was fighting on a ship, then that could be the case.
Yeah. Now we know that Avery was a pretty up and coming man from the tales. That he didn't spend his money on tobacco or whores or other extras. He saved his money for the family. He was quite prudent with his money, which, you know, he probably learned from his parents.
That's unusual.
To keep a good coin, you know, to not go spending it all.
True.
And we know that in August 29th of 1690 that he had been discharged from the Royal Navy. And from there, we know that he entered the Atlantic slave trade.
Yeah, true. At this time now, you understand that even the royal family there of England was involved in the slave trade. And that we find it completely and totally repugnant today, that trading in humans and taking their freedom. But back then, under the guise of their holy book there, the Bible, they decided then that those of lesser colors and the sorts and lesser cultures could be taken as slaves and traded back and forth for money. And even the royal family and even those who were legitimate sailors and captains, and this could be Captain Avery also, might get involved in that as a way to make money.
Now we know that in 1693 that he was identified in the Royal African Company agent that I have nowhere upon the coast met the Negroes so shy as here, which makes me fancy they have had tricks they'd played them by such blades as Long Ben, alias Avery, who has seized them and carried them away.
So he would be a slave Caesar, then also taking them captive and taking them away.
Now after young Ben left the service of the slave trade, he actually went back to the Royal Navy, and in the spring of 1693 we know that he was there to capture on board another ship that captured 4 ships, a pink called the Seventh Sun, a frigate called the Dove, of which William Dampier was the second mate, and the James and the Charles, which Avery was commissioned first mate of.
Oh, there you go.
And then after that, he came on board the warship Charles II, of 46 guns. Now that's quite a formidable ship.
Those days,
At that
it
time.
would be
6 guns.
quite a bit, yeah.
Now, the crew of the Charles was commissioned to be paid every 6 months. That was in the agreement. And the ship then went on over to Spain and was there in Spain to try and get some, I believe it was peace or things like that. And they hadn't been paid for a very long time. So they started to mutiny.
Oh,
They got very mad, as sailors will do. When you don't get paid what you're promised pay, and it's what's in your commission to be paid, you get a little bit upset. I think any one of us would probably get upset at wherever we be if somebody promised to pay every 6 months and they didn't give us our pay.
mutiny upon the high seas. Yeah.
And we know that on Monday, May 7th of 1694, at about 9 p.m., Avery and 25 of his men rushed on board the Charles. They surprised the crew. They mutinied in a bloodless event. Admiral O'Brien, who was asleep on shore, was one reason why they got away with it. And the Captain Gibson was actually bedridden at the time, so it made it a little bit easier.
Well, what I consider then is that they asked the captain and said, "Captain, we've a mind to head out and make our way, make our own fortune. Will you come with us?" And the captain refused and said he wouldn't be part of any mutiny against the Royal Navy and such. And so they put him aside, and then they sailed out there with their ship and headed out into the open ocean there to seek their fortune.
Now there was a code, though, that some of the other crew from other ships sailed up alongside the Charles, and the password was, "Is the drunken boatswain on board?" Now, when the Charles fled, there was another ship called the James, which fired upon the ship, and which alerted the Spanish watch, and it actually forced Avery to flee.
Oh, true.
And at which point then he made his way down along the Round
True.
of Africa.
And of course, we've mentioned the pirate round before. We've done stories about it and tales. But it'd be where a pirate had left the confines of Europe or the Caribbean and had headed down around Africa, back over into the Indian Ocean there to seek their fortunes there by taking the ships of the Moguls. And that being those pilgrims there who make their way back and forth to Mecca in the Red Sea.
Now, Henry being of minor nobility, or of rank, the crew decided to vote him as captain, and he agreed. And he did talk to him about going into the Indian Ocean to try and attack some of the Mughal ships, thinking that they could get quite a good haul of treasure. He had about 150 crew at this time. He made a stop in Madagascar and resupplied. Mm-hmm. And then he met up with some other men. He had Thomas Tew with him, who had the 8-gun Amity.
True.
He had Richard Want with the Dolphin. He had Joseph Farrow of the Plymouth Adventure. So the 4 captains had decided that they were going to combine forces and go up and try and find a rich haul in the Indian Ocean from the Mughal fleets.
Well, of course. Now, one of the things you might understand is that those fleets were very wealthy. People had taken money back and forth to Mecca, and they had spread this money about, and they had taken what they had called, taxes of the sorts and various sorts of different bribes and things, and put them aboard their ships, and there would be great deals of gems and gold and silvers aboard those ships.
And silks
and fine fabrics and many spices. Many things. Yeah.
Now, when they went to attack the Mughal ship fired off a blast, and it had a misfire, which killed some of the crew, which caused a great panic and caused confusion, which allowed Avery and Tew to get up along the Mughal ship and start attacking it.
True.
Now, Thomas Tew was killed in this attack. He and his ship, the Amity, and Thomas Tew took a cannonball right to the guts and he died right there.
He did.
Now, this was actually Thomas Tew's second cruise, because he'd done one before, and he got to Great Holland and went back to New York and had settled and was quite happy with the money that he had. But his crew talked him back into going, and he went. And at which point he hooked back up with Avery.
That can happen, true.
And it was about, I believe the time frame of this was about August of 1695, and on the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb, which they were going. Mecca, if you don't know, Mecca is in Saudi Arabia.
That'd be about there.
It'd be right about, let me move this, it'd be right about here if you'd be seeing it. So this is where they were headed, but this would be where they were going to, through, and where they did the attack. But this is about where Mecca is, in Saudi Arabia. Now, Avery and his crew rushed on board the Mogul ship with only about 113 men. There were 400 to 600 Mogul guards there, well armed, and about 600 passengers. And they actually overwhelmed them.
Quite ferocious they were.
Quite ferocious. And then they spent many days having their way with the women.
It was a terrible thing there, folks, then, that they had taken advantage of those poor peoples, abused them in many terrible ways. It said that Avery himself didn't participate, but that he felt that he could not stop his crew from creating and enjoying great lessons there upon those poor peoples. Here at the Pirate Round, we do not condone any sort of horrible behavior such as that. But we're presenting history in a raw and unvarnished aspect of that it is. And so you get the good with the bad, folks. There's no way around it.
Now, Avery and his crew ended up catching about 60,000 pounds of gold, silver, and gems.
That's quite a bit.
That's a huge haul.
True.
Huge haul. And it caused a bounty of 1,000 pounds to be put on his head. It caused the first worldwide manhunt at the time from the Admiralty and the Moguls
and the East India Company,
right, put on this huge bounty to his head, and 1,000 pounds at that time is a hefty. It's equivalent to about $156,000 nowadays, approximately. Now, once old Long Ben left there, he didn't go right back to Madagascar. He went to another small island to the east. You remember what that island's name was?
Well, they called it Reunion, or called, there's a French name for it too.
Bourbon or something.
Bourbon, yes.
Bourbon, Bourbon. Right. And at that point, each of his crew got about 1,000 pounds of coin, which is a pretty hefty price.
That'd be a little over $100,000 today.
During the fight, only two ships, Tew's Amity and Avery's Fancy, were the only two ships to actually reach the fight. The others were too slow and didn't get there in time, but they did end up splitting some of the money with them.
That's true.
But there was a great problem with some of that, because one of the other ships I believe it might be called the Pearl, the crew were chipping the coins, which we just talked about in a previous episode about the coins.
Shaving the corners off the coins there to save the silver.
The Amity, or not the Amity, the Fancy's crew was quite upset with that, so they took all that treasure from them and left them be.
That's true.
And then they sailed. There's reports that he stopped somewhere along the lines in Africa, and Tew was quite the wily fellow. He's quite smart.
Not Tew.
Avery.
Avery.
My mistake. Not Tew. Because Tew was dead at that point.
He would be.
Right. So, it is believed that at which point that Avery and his crew, when they stopped in Africa, instead of having their money be traced, they bought a bunch of slaves, which they could then take to the New World and sell them off and get all their coin back. So the money could not be traced back to them and say, oh, this is Mogul money, this is a Mogul gem, this is a Mogul, Mogul silks and whatever, Mogul spice.
That'd be true.
So it was a lot harder for anybody at that time. Nowadays it's easier to trace, how money has gone, but in that time that would have been a brilliant thing to do. And then they sailed for St. Thomas, where they sold off some of the treasure, some of the slaves, and gained their money. At which point, 4 of Avery's crew sailed to Nassau to try and work a trade with the governor at the time, Governor Tuat.
Yeah.
And it was agreed that Avery would hand over the Fancy along with many goods, 50 tons of ivory, 100 guns, 100 barrels of gunpowder, several chests of weapons and ammunition. And, Tuat took in quite a bit of that money, and he didn't report anything, but he did not give Avery the pardon that Avery wanted.
Oh, he did not.
So, I believe at that time Avery sailed away, and there was a rumor that they bought some ships, I believe.
Well, there's the thing there that they traded his large ship for 2 small sloops. Now, some of his men managed to get a ship there in the Bahamas and sailed for Brazil, where they wanted to do more raiding, and they were never heard from again. The 2 small sloops then sailed for Old England, and through lack of navigational skill, one of them crashed upon the coast of Ireland, and where they were found out, and they were taken in custody and sent back to England for trial. However, the other sloop, there's no tale of whatever happened to it.
Now, there were 24 of his men that stayed on Nassau, and 5 of those ended up being captured and executed.
Right.
Some of the other crew went up into the colonies.
Yeah.
But
some disappeared into the New World.
New World,
and they never saw them or heard from them again.
Now, the treasure was never recovered.
No, it was not.
Not one coin.
No, not a bit.
Not one coin.
Well, no, there was one bit, and one pirate was caught by a chambermaid who lifted his coat and found it was strangely heavy.
Right. That's right.
And found that he had sewn 1,000 pounds worth of Mogul coins into the lining of his coat. And he was captured, and he was put on trial, and he turned state's evidence against his own brothers, and told them the whole sordid tale of what happened with Henry Avery and the like. And so the manhunt, of course, pursued Avery everywhere, and they thought perhaps he was here, he was there, but they never did find him or any of his officers. His quartermasters and the like, they all disappeared, and they were never heard from again.
There's many persistent rumors that Avery died in poverty, that he was swindled out of his money, or that he became a king ruling in Madagascar. Now, it's not very probable that any of these were true, because Avery had such a huge bounty on top of his head of 1,000 coins, and had he been swindled out of his money, people would have turned evidence and picked him up, and he would have been caught.
True.
And had they known that he died in poverty, well, then somebody knew where he was.
Yeah, that's true.
So
it never happened.
It's very unlikely that any of these things really happened. Now, there's a book called A General History of the Robberies and Murders of the Most Notorious Pirates by Charles Johnson, Captain Charles Johnson. And, everything that we suspect we know about pirates is in this book. And this book, in many ways, is actually quite a sham, because he's made up so many stories, and this is one of the tales that you get about Avery from that book.
Yeah.
It's a good book to have in your collection.
It is.
But it's not a very accurate book, because a lot of it was made up and was falsehoods.
Yeah, even the painting on the cover was largely a fictionalization of.
Right.
Oh, of course there. I know, of course, then Captain Johnson, his tale then is, of course, that Henry was cheated by North Country merchants there when he gave them a bit of his gems and thought to get money from them, and they took the rest of his gems and cheated him. And he died in poverty without even a coin to put under his eyes there to send him across with the ferry van. And he was buried in a shambled old coffin and died in poverty and rags. Now, you had to have, of course, a tale like that, because you could never have a story about how someone might have gotten away with it, because that would be a morality tale that it would not a lesson that you could tell people.
Right.
But
Sure.
the thing is about Avery and his crew is they truly did get away with it, folks. We don't really know where they went and what they did, but they were never heard from again.
Now, Charles Johnson, it's probably a fictional name. Somebody, says, he's Willem Dafoe and
Daniel Defoe.
Not Daniel Defoe. Not
He could be William Dafoe too.
William
but-
Dafoe too. William Dafoe playing Captain Charles Johnson.
True.
But it's a lot of what he did. He did it just like a journalist nowadays would do. You're trying to make a lot of money.
And lots of speculation in there also.
Now, Avery's flag. Let's talk a minute about Avery's flag. A lot of times we see Avery's flag, and we've got the skull side profile with the bandana and the crossbones.
Yeah.
That flag actually didn't come about until 1620. There's no real proof of what his flag looked like. They believe it was actually possibly a red flag with 4 gold chevrons, some say 3 silver chevrons, which was the Avery coat of arms had chevrons on it.
True.
So it's not really likely, you know, a lot of what we know about the flags today, a lot of it is really made up. There are a few flags that we know exist. Part of that story too, we know that Wayne's flag was one of the first reported, and that was in the 1700s.
True. Quite often pirates would fly what they call the blood flag, which is a bright red flag, and that symboled no quarter. And when they would come first upon you, they would fly the flag of the country they were from. That'd be in England or Spain or France. And when they would fly, they would fire off a cannon shot, and if you resisted, then they would run up the red flag, run up the Jolly Rouge, or they would say, run up the blood banner, and it would be, okay, no quarter now for you because you're going to fight. So when we come aboard your ship, there would be taking no surrenders. We'd be killing everyone about it. And then when pirates would fly under their black flag, now the black flag, of course, being a black flag with a skeleton or a bones on it or swords of the sort, a black flag was meant to strike fear because in many armies in Europe carried the skull and crossbones upon their banners as a way to strike fear in the heart of those who they were attacking. And so they did that so that they would fly the black flag and you would know who they were, that they were not legitimate ship captains and sort, they were pirates. But they continued to use the bloody flag, or what they called the bloody bones, because often it was a blood red flag with a collection of bones sewn onto it, and that of course meant no quarter.
The idea was that they wanted you to surrender.
Yeah.
So you didn't want to wait for the red flag to go up.
Nope. No, that meant a fight, and that meant a fight that chances are you wouldn't win, and they would put you to the sword.
So with that, I think it's time we end this episode of the Pirate Round about
Right.
Henry Avery.
That's
I
true.
hope you've enjoyed this little bit of an
It's a
episode.
bit of history here. So as we end our episode of the Pirate Round, we say to you folks, thank you so much for watching. And we thank you so much for stabbing that subscribe button and spreading the word of piracy here on the YouTubers channel. And we say to you, to all our friends who aren't here, to those we've yet to meet, we say to you friends, thank you so much for watching. And remember, you'll be a pirate. You'll be strong, you'll be confident, and you have confidence in yourself. And don't let anyone grind you under their heels or make you afraid. You be a pirate, and you be strong. Yar har.
Your heart. Well, smooth sailing to you.
Har, thank you.